Hey friends, welcome back. I've got my shaders on, the Minecraft world is loading in slow and peaceful, and tonight's lineup is pure chaos, served warm and satisfying. Whether you're building something in-game or just hanging out, you're in the right place. Because he got me fired, so I got him arrested, might be one of the most cold-blooded stories I've ever read. And honestly, there's something oddly satisfying about watching someone try to play dirty and getting destroyed by their own lies. And let's be honest, when someone's willing to ruin your life to save face, seeing karma pull up in a squad car is absolutely delicious. But that's just the beginning. In tonight's lineup, we've got fake weddings, stolen lunches, data-driven downfalls, and yes, a revenge plot involving industrial strength wasabi. Grab your favorite snack, get comfy, and let's start with the story of a quiet IT guy and the coworker who really should have picked a different target. I'm not the kind of person who likes office drama. I'm the headphones in, scripts running, caffeine nearby type. I worked in IT support at a mid-sized financial consulting firm. Nothing glamorous, mostly babysitting outdated systems, resetting passwords for the fifth time, and praying printers would stop being possessed. But it paid well, had decent coffee, and up until a few months ago, I genuinely thought I'd found a stable, chill gig. Enter Brandon. Brandon worked in the same department, but while I handled most of the deep system stuff, he spent most of his time in meetings he wasn't needed in, walking around with a coffee cup like a prop, and somehow charming upper management into thinking he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. We weren't friends, we were barely co-workers, but he had this way of always being there, lurking just close enough to overhear your work, but not close enough to contribute. The downfall started with a system outage, a bad one. We were running a legacy server for a few key clients. Don't ask me why. I'd been begging to migrate for over a year. And one night, the entire system went dark. Client data was inaccessible, backups hadn't run, and one of our oldest accounts lost a whole week of transaction records. It was my weekend off. I wasn't even on call. By Monday morning, the situation had escalated into full-blown panic mode. Clients were threatening to walk. Our manager was getting screamed at. And guess who Brandon told them had been the one managing the affected server? Yeah, me. Now, here's where it gets infuriating. I had worked on that server months earlier to fix a vulnerability Brandon had ignored. But he'd been the one making updates that week. Problem is, he never used his own login for admin tasks. He always borrowed credentials or used generic access accounts, which made the audit logs point to me. When HR called me in, I expected it to be a formality, but the moment I sat down, I knew I was screwed. Their faces were stone cold. They said there was evidence I had made unauthorized changes to a live environment, and even though I protested, showed emails, Slack messages proving I hadn't even been online that weekend, they'd already decided. I was fired by the end of the meeting. The worst part? Brandon had the nerve to pat me on the shoulder as I walked out. Said something like, "Tough break, man. Happens to the best of us." The audacity was breathtaking. I spent the first week in a haze of disbelief. It's a weird kind of humiliation, being blamed for something you didn't do, especially in tech, where your reputation follows you like a shadow. Every job lead went cold the moment they called my references. I couldn't prove it, but I knew Brandon had poisoned the well. Then, 2 weeks into my job hunt, a former coworker messaged me. He was venting about how Brandon had suddenly been promoted to a new data architecture liaison position, which was basically code for high access, low responsibility. And get this, the guy said Brandon had been acting weird about the client. Data. Too protective, moving files to offsite backups that no one had requested, encrypting stuff that didn't need encryption. My stomach dropped. You ever get that feeling like all the puzzle pieces are just floating in your brain and suddenly they click? Because that's exactly what happened. Brandon hadn't just thrown me under the bus to save himself. He had created the crash. On purpose. I started digging. It wasn't easy. I didn't have access anymore. But I knew the systems inside and out. And I knew people. Quiet people. The ones who keep their heads down and their screens locked. Over the next month, I pieced together everything. He had set up an encrypted tunnel on one of our sandbox VMS. A place no one looked at twice because it wasn't supposed to be live. From there, he was siphoning off financial data, client spending habits, portfolio movements, internal memos, and uploading them to a private server hosted overseas. I traced the IP using a few tricks and flagged the patterns in metadata from cached logs some of my old coworkers helped me retrieve. I didn't go to HR. I went to legal. I wrote up everything. The access logs, the file movement patterns, the overseas IP, the user activity, the timestamps. I even included a copy of Brandon's Slack messages bragging about leveraging client metadata for personal growth, because of course he couldn't resist sounding like a LinkedIn influencer about it. I sent the report anonymously, but I made sure they had no doubt who it was about. 3 weeks later, I got a text from the same coworker. Dude, he's gone. Like, walked out with 2 security guards and an HR rep. They're saying it's federal. I didn't laugh. I just sat there in my tiny apartment, half a coffee in hand, and stared at the message. After everything he'd done, Brandon had actually been arrested. Okay, pause. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit revenge as I am. Subscribe, tap that bell, and let's get back to watching people learn the hard way that karma never skips a turn. The best part? The company quietly reached out a few weeks later to reconsider our previous separation. I politely declined. I already had 3 interviews lined up because, wouldn't you know it, once Brandon wasn't around to sabotage me, my references started sounding a lot more accurate. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, precise. I didn't just get my job back, I got my name back. And Brandon? He's probably explaining VPNs to a federal investigator right now. And speaking of people getting exactly what they deserve, let me tell you about a wedding speech that destroyed a whole family. When my parents passed away, everything changed. Not just in the normal, grief-stricken, trying to keep it together kind of way. I mean everything. My brother Mark suddenly started acting like the king of the world. Like our parents had handed him the keys to the kingdom, and I was just some peasant lucky to be breathing near the royal family. I should have known something was off when he insisted on handling the will. He told me, "Don't worry about the legal stuff, I've got it." Which, coming from the guy who once locked himself out of his own car while it was running, should have been a red flag. But I was grieving, overwhelmed, and honestly, I just didn't want to fight. So I nodded, signed whatever the lawyer handed me, and tried to believe he'd do the right thing. Spoiler alert, he did not. Turns out my parents had left us both equal shares of everything. Their house, some savings, retirement accounts. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to help with student loans and maybe put a down payment on a modest place. But what Mark presented to me was a will where I got a single item, my mum's piano. No money, no property, just the piano, which by the way he never even delivered. At first I thought it was a mistake, that maybe our parents had made some changes late in life and just hadn't told me. But it kept nagging at me. The way Mark avoided conversations about finances, how he suddenly bought a brand new SUV, how he quit his job 2 months later and said he was going to focus on wedding planning full time. That's when I started digging. I reached out to the law office that had handled my parents' affairs, told them I needed a certified copy of the original will for tax reasons. The paralegal on the phone was confused. She said the file had already been closed and that both beneficiaries had received copies. I said, funny. I never did. 2 days later, a thick manila envelope landed in my mailbox. Inside was the truth, the original will. And just like I thought, it named me and Mark as equal heirs, 50-50 split across all assets. But what I had signed, the version Mark gave me, it had been altered, sloppily, a few lines removed, signatures pasted in from scanned documents. It was a poorly done fraud job, but good enough to trick someone who trusted their own brother. Let me tell you something, there's a special kind of heartbreak that comes with realizing someone you grew up with, shared birthdays and Saturday morning cartoons with, is willing to rob you blind. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because revenge is best served when the cake's already been ordered and the guests are seated. Mark's wedding was coming up fast. Big fancy venue, hundreds of guests, live band, open bar. His fiancée Rachel was sweet. Too sweet for him, honestly, and had asked me to be her maid of honor. And yeah, that part stung a little. That she picked me because she thought of me as family, not knowing he'd already tried to erase me from our actual family. So I smiled. I helped pick flowers, I tried on dresses, and I planned. Then came the rehearsal dinner. Mark gave this big speech about family, how important trust is in a relationship. how excited he was to start a life with Rachel. Everyone clapped. Rachel teared up. And I sat there, staring at the man who'd stolen thousands of dollars from me, like he was just some motivational speaker on a podium of lies. But that wasn't even the worst part. The night before the wedding, I caught him bragging to one of his groomsmen about how easy it had been to cut me out of the will. He was laughing, like he was some kind of evil mastermind and not a man-child with a criminal paper trail. That was the final nail. I didn't sleep much that night, not from nerves, just anticipation. The wedding day was perfect. Rachel looked stunning. The ceremony was held in this elegant old mansion with ivy crawling up the walls and champagne flowing like water. People laughed, cried, posed for photos. Mark kissed his bride, and I clapped like the proud sister I was pretending to be. And then came the reception. Time for the maid of honor speech. I took the mic with a smile, thanked the guests, complimented Rachel, and then I said, I just want to take a moment to talk about family, about honesty, about the importance of not forging legal documents to rob your sister of her inheritance. The room went silent. Mark laughed, like I was telling some edgy joke. So I held up the copies. 2 wills, 1 real, 1 fake. Then I pulled out the file of bank statements showing the withdrawals, the property transfer paperwork, the signatures that didn't match, and a notarized affidavit from the original lawyer stating the version I had signed was never part of the firm's record. Rachel turned to him like she'd just seen a ghost. Mark's face went pale, then red, then pale again. He tried to grab the mic. I stepped back and let him flail. I said, I'm not here to ruin a wedding, just to make sure my brother's next chapter starts with the full truth. Since he seems to like rewriting history, Rachel stared at him for what felt like an eternity. Then, without a word, she slapped him, hard, like a movie scene. Guests gasped, someone dropped a glass. The band stopped mid-song. Mark tried to speak, but she was already walking. Straight out the front doors, bouquet still in hand. The wedding ended not long after. The guests trickled out awkwardly. Mark's friends avoided eye contact. His mother, my aunt, who had known nothing about the inheritance drama, just shook her head and followed Rachel outside. I left not long after. Did I feel bad? Number. Not even a little. Because the thing about betrayal is that it doesn't get to hide behind flowers and tuxedos. It wants to stay quiet, to go unnoticed. And sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is shine a big, blinding spotlight on it. A week later, Mark tried to call me. Said he wanted to explain. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded everything to a lawyer. The one who helped draft the original will. Because guess what? Fraudulently altering legal documents and misappropriating inheritance funds isn't just morally bankrupt, it's illegal. We're still in the middle of that process. But let's just say, his brand new SUV? Not his anymore. Sometimes the best revenge isn't crashing the party. It's calmly delivering the truth in front of everyone he thought would never hear it. And speaking of people getting exactly what they deserve, let me tell you about one woman who got very creative when her coworker wouldn't stop stealing her lunch. There are few things more violating in an office than someone stealing your lunch. I know that sounds dramatic, but trust me, if you've ever spent your morning thinking about those leftovers from last night, only to open the fridge and find your container gone, you get it. It's not just the food, it's the audacity. The sheer, shameless, sticky-fingered entitlement it takes to eat someone else's labeled lunch and act like nothing happened. And unfortunately for me, this wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. It started with small things, an apple missing from my bag, a yogurt gone here and there. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I forgot it at home. Maybe I ate it and just forgot. You know how your brain short-circuits during morning emails and too much coffee? But then it got bolder. Entire containers started disappearing. Meals I knew I brought in. Homemade stir-fry. A beautifully prepped salmon salad. My mum's baked CT that I'd packed specifically for a Monday boost. Gone. Just gone. I started labeling everything clearly. Big, bold name written across the top with a thick Sharpie. I even started taping notes that said, "Do not touch. This belongs to someone who will notice." But did that stop them? Nope. If anything, they seemed emboldened. Now, our office fridge was one of those communal black hole situations. Stuff got pushed to the back and forgotten. Things grew ecosystems. And no one, Not even HR wanted to be in charge of it. We all just silently agreed to pretend it didn't exist beyond storing our stuff. But once my meals started disappearing regularly, I took it personally. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a targeted operation. Someone in that office was helping themselves to my food like it was an open buffet, and frankly, I was done being polite about it. I tried asking around subtly. Hey, have you guys noticed food disappearing from the fridge? Blank stares. A few muttered jokes about the fridge bandit. One guy even said, "Oh yeah, that's just how it is. You gotta guard your stuff, guard it? What is this prison?" That's when I decided to stop playing defense. Now, I've always had a dark sense of humor, and as someone who enjoys cooking, I figured I'd make something irresistible. Something that looked gourmet, smelled delicious, and had that smug little sparkle that says, I spent hours on this, and you'll never recreate it. But instead of filet mignon or truffle pasta, I used canned dog food. The high-end kind, mind you. The stuff with real duck and organic sweet potatoes, and a label so fancy it looked like something you'd find at Whole Foods for humans. I mixed it with a little instant mashed potatoes, some beef broth to smooth it out, and plated it beautifully in a glass container with a side of crusty bread. I even drizzled olive oil over the top and added a sprig of rosemary, just for aesthetics. It looked like rustic French cuisine. I labeled it, of course, "Do not touch." This means you, and then, because I'm not stupid, I also set up a camera. Nothing fancy, just a little USB webcam tucked on top of the fridge, angled perfectly at the break room table. Our company had no policies against recording in shared spaces, and honestly, if anyone found out, I'd be the least of their problems. The next morning, I placed my masterpiece in the fridge, went back to my desk, and waited. Lunchtime rolled around. People started filtering into the break room, the microwave started humming, and I kept glancing over at the live feed on my screen like I was watching the most suspenseful cooking show of my life. And then, there she was, Jessica, from accounting, walking into frame like it was just another Tuesday. I watched her open the fridge, pull out my container, look at the label, then shrug and take it to the microwave. I swear to you, she even smelled it approvingly. She sat down at the table, took a big bite, and immediately smiled. This woman was actually enjoying it, and that, more than anything, is what blew my mind. She didn't just steal someone's food, she did it with confidence. Like she had earned it. Like it was a perk of the job no one told her to stop taking. She finished half of it before something shifted in her expression. Maybe the texture caught up to her. Maybe her taste buds finally screamed, "This is not human food." She stood up quickly, glanced around, threw the rest in the trash, wiped her mouth and left the room looking unsettled. But the damage, done. Now, I wasn't going to release the footage publicly. I'm not a monster. But I did send it to HR. And here's where things got even more delicious. HR called me in first, said there had been a complaint filed about someone tampering with food. I calmly asked if they wanted to see the footage. They did. I played it for them. All of it. Jessica, the container, the label, the moment she took the bite, and that face when she realized something wasn't quite right. The HR rep watched in silence. When the video ended, they cleared their throat and said, We'll be addressing this immediately. Jessica didn't show up for work the next day, or the day after that. Rumor was she called in sick a week later. She put in a formal request to switch to remote-only status, citing hostile in-office energy. I didn't say a word, because sometimes the best revenge isn't public humiliation or yelling matches. Sometimes it's just watching someone try to steal something they think is valuable, only to find out it was never meant for them in the first place. Also, I never had a lunch go missing again. Wow. Imagine stealing someone's clearly labeled food, only to end up on the receiving end of a gourmet dog food delicacy. The confidence, the delusion, and that sudden moment of realization. Chef's kiss. Sometimes being the reasonable person in an unreasonable situation makes you look like the bad guy. But other times, you just have to out-petty the thief with seasoning and a side of performance art. But not every revenge needs food. Sometimes all you need is a spreadsheet and a deadline. I've always been the kind of person who flies under the radar at work. Not in a slacker way. I get my stuff done early if I can. But I'm not the loudest in the room. I don't brown nose, and I definitely don't play corporate politics. So when I started getting weird tension from my new boss, I honestly didn't know what I'd done to set her off. Her name was Patricia, and she walked into the company like she'd been sent by the gods of LinkedIn. MBA from some online business school, zero sense of humor, and this energy like she was trying to prove something every time she opened her mouth. She loved buzzwords: synergy, scalability, value alignment, you name it. She'd squeeze three into one sentence if she could. At first, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. New boss, maybe she's just finding her footing. But pretty quickly it became clear she had a problem with me. And I don't mean in a vague, we don't vibe way. I mean target locked. Everything I did suddenly wasn't collaborative enough or aligned with the department's new direction. She'd nitpick my projects, micromanage meetings, and find weird reasons to delay my deadlines. After I'd already submitted early. I'm not paranoid. People on my team started noticing it too. She's got it out for you, man, my coworker Jonah whispered one day after a meeting where Patricia interrupted me 6 times in 10 minutes to clarify my framing. Still, I kept my head down, focused on my work, but then she brought in this new productivity initiative. She framed it like it was going to empower high-performing team members. In reality, it was a performance-based firing policy. Basically, every quarter, employees had to meet certain measurable benchmarks: project turnaround time, client satisfaction, team hours, even Slack activity. If you fell below a certain percentile, you were eligible for review. And here's where it gets spicy. I was the one in charge of generating those productivity reports. Our team had just switched over to a new system I helped implement, something Patricia had enthusiastically endorsed, probably thinking she could use it to make herself look good to upper management. Spoiler alert, she should have read the fine print. The system logged everything: real-time task updates, active project hours, login times, meeting attendance, email traffic. It even showed patterns of when people were active versus just present. And Patricia, her numbers were atrocious. She spent over 60% of her time in meetings, many of which she scheduled herself, when nothing actually got done. Her email patterns were performative at best. She'd draft messages at 3 p.m. and schedule them to send at 11:47 p.m. to look like she was working late. Her actual output, less than half of what the average analyst on our team was producing. So I did what any rational person being quietly hunted by a narcissistic manager would do. I started building a dossier. I logged 6 months of reports, screenshotted patterns, tracked project assignments and completions. I even cross-referenced timestamps from her calendar with Slack status changes. Meanwhile, Patricia was getting bolder. She'd started making comments in meetings about dead weight on the team and how not everyone adapts well to change. Then came the breaking point. During one of our infamous Friday 5 p.m. team calls, she announced that starting next quarter, performance reviews would be the sole basis for promotions, raises, and continued employment. She looked right at me when she said, "No one is exempt. We all need to earn our place." That's when I knew she was planning to use the system I built to fire me. I smiled, nodded, waved at her through the Zoom box like I wasn't already halfway done with my presentation. By the time my review rolled around, I had it ready. She scheduled mine for 4:30 on a Friday. Of course, I showed up early, files open, calm as ever. Patricia opened with the usual performative tone. Said she'd been monitoring some concerns about my output and team synergy. I let her talk. Then I asked, "Would you mind if I showed you some numbers?" She looked confused but agreed. After all, she thought she had me backed into a corner. I shared my screen and walked her through 6 months of productivity data. Started with team averages, then my metrics, on-time delivery, client ratings, efficiency ratios, all top tier. Then I moved on to the broader department, slowly, deliberately. By the time I hit her name in the charts, she looked like she'd swallowed a stapler. Her metrics were dead last: lowest output, highest non-project time, most meetings with no deliverables. I pointed out the late-night emails she scheduled, the non-existent project completion rate, and even the fact that one of her presentations was just a recycled deck from a previous department, down to the wrong logo. She tried to cut in. I kept going. Then I pulled up the system settings. "Just so we're clear," I said, "all this data came from the tracking software you personally mandated. So it's safe to say these numbers are objective, right?" She didn't respond, just stared at the screen. I ended the presentation with a simple slide. Leadership should lead by example. The following Monday, Patricia didn't show up to work. HR sent out a vague email about a transition in department leadership. A week later, a new interim manager was announced. Guess who got promoted to team lead? Not me, but my coworker Jonah, who immediately abolished all Friday 5 p.m. meetings and gave us all the next Monday off. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone drown in their own system, especially when they handed you the blueprint for the boat. Wow. Patricia really said, let's track everyone's productivity, without considering that someone might, you know, track hers back. This is what happens when a manager confuses control with competence. Sometimes giving someone enough rope really does the trick, especially when they hand it to you and say, hey, can you measure this for me? Speaking of people who think they're untouchable, let's talk about a babysitter who underestimated just how smart a 9-year-old could be. We hired Megan off a neighborhood app. She was 16, good with kids, and lived 4 doors down. The kind of teen you assume is trustworthy because she's got braces and bakes cookies for school fundraisers. My daughter Emma liked her instantly, which, to be honest, was a relief. It's not always easy finding someone your kid actually vibes with, so we set up a regular schedule. 2 evenings a week, sometimes a Saturday afternoon. At first, everything seemed fine. Megan showed up on time, followed the rules, even sent little updates when Emma went to bed. We paid her well, kept the pantry stocked with snacks she liked, and trusted her completely. Then small things started disappearing. Nothing major at first. A pair of earrings, a little Bluetooth speaker from Emma's room, a $20 bill I could have sworn I left on the kitchen counter. I brushed it off. Told myself I was just being forgetful or scatterbrained. I mean, with work, school stuff, and managing a house, it's easy to misplace things. But then Emma lost a necklace her grandma had given her. Nothing expensive, just sentimental. She cried about it for a solid hour, and I helped her tear her room apart looking for it. No luck. A week later, Megan came over wearing a necklace that looked very familiar. It had the same silver charm, the same twisted chain. When I asked where she got it, she said, "Oh, it's just something I found in my jewelry box." I think it was a gift from my aunt. I didn't push it. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't have proof. And if I was wrong, even a little bit, I didn't want to accuse a teenage girl of theft without solid evidence. Plus, let's be honest, the fallout would have been nuclear. Her parents were the kind of suburban helicopter types who would have turned this into a neighborhood scandal before I could finish a sentence. But Emma had other plans. She came to me 2 days later and said, "Dad, I think Megan's been stealing stuff." I asked her why she thought that. Because things only go missing when she's here. And because I saw her put your speaker in her tote bag last week. Cue dramatic Minecraft music. I asked her why she didn't say anything sooner. She said she was scared I wouldn't believe her, or that if we confronted Megan, she'd deny everything and keep stealing. Then she said, "So I want to set a trap." This girl, 9 years old, going on full-blown heist movie protagonist. She'd already built the whole thing in her head. We take an old jewelry box, fill it with fake valuables, and rig it with glitter bombs. And not just glitter. She wanted color dye packets too, stuff that would mark Megan if she opened it. Honestly, I was skeptical, but the more I thought about it, the more genius it sounded. We didn't even need to catch her in the act. We just needed her to fall for it. So we got to work. I found an old jewelry box in the attic. Emma filled it with costume jewelry and a couple of knockoff trinkets that looked real enough. We ordered a glitter packet and a dye pack online, the kind they use in prank videos. Bright pink, non-toxic, impossible to remove for a few days. I rigged it so the minute the lid popped open, the glitter would explode upward and the dye would mist out in all directions. We labeled it clearly. It said, "Private." Do not touch. Emma placed it on the nightstand in her room, halfway tucked under a notebook to make it seem tempting but not obvious. Then we waited. Megan came over the next afternoon. I told her I'd be working from home but would stay in the office. Emma said she had a headache and wanted to lie down, which Megan accepted with barely a glance. Classic teen babysitter mode, eyes on her phone, completely disinterested in anything besides the Wi-Fi password. 15 minutes after I heard her walk upstairs, I heard the poof, followed by a scream, then coughing, then stomping, then a string of words I'm pretty sure she didn't learn from Emma. I stepped out of my office just in time to see Megan tearing down the stairs, face and hair covered in glitter and bright pink dye. Her shirt looked like it had lost a paintball war. Her phone was in her hand, screen cracked. Her tote bag, still upstairs. She didn't say a word to me, just bolted out the front door like the house was haunted. Emma came down the stairs a second later with the most satisfied grin I've ever seen. "Did it work?" she asked. "Oh yeah," I said. "It really worked. Now here's where things got extra spicy." Megan went on TikTok that night, posted a dramatic video about how she'd been attacked by a family she babysat for, called it a hostile work environment, claimed she'd opened a box thinking it was a gift, and that she'd been assaulted with chemicals in an unsafe prank. The comments were a mix of "girl what?" and "why were you opening boxes labeled private?" But the best part? Emma had filmed the whole thing. She'd set her old iPad up facing the door and caught Megan walking in, picking up the box, reading the label, and opening it anyway. Boom. Full-on glitter explosion caught in 720p with timestamp. I posted that video. No names, no identifying info. Just babysitter opens box that isn't hers. Instant karma. It blew up faster than hers ever did. Within 24 hours, Megan deleted her account. Her mom showed up at our door the next evening, furious obviously, demanding to know if we were trying to ruin her daughter's reputation. I calmly handed her a flash drive with the video and the glittery pink-stained jewelry box. She looked like she wanted to sink into the porch steps. They never came back. We didn't press charges. We didn't need to. Emma got her necklace back. We found it in Megan's tote bag, along with my missing Bluetooth speaker and 2 pairs of earrings I hadn't even realized were gone yet. Sometimes the smallest person in the room has the sharpest instincts. Wow. Imagine being outwitted by a 9-year-old and getting glitter bombed as your final act. Honestly, poetic justice with a touch of Lisa Frank energy. There's something deeply satisfying about this kind of revenge. Not loud, not cruel, just brilliantly earned. Sometimes the best parenting move is knowing when to step back and let your kid run the sting operation. Now that's one way to parent, but not every parent is that smart, especially not this one. Working retail means you get used to chaos. Holiday rushes, screaming kids, coupon wars. You build up a kind of emotional callus. But nothing prepared me for Kyle, or his mum. Kyle was hired as a seasonal cashier at the store I managed. Big-name clothing chain inside a busy shopping mall. From the jump, he had nepotism hire energy. Late to his first shift, wearing wrinkled khakis and texting during orientation. When I gently reminded him we had a dress code, he rolled his eyes and muttered something about not being here long anyway. Charming. Still, I gave him the same shot I gave everyone. I'm not a tyrant, I know retail sucks sometimes. But Kyle made it his entire personality. He'd vanish for 30-minute bathroom breaks, hide in the stockroom pretending to do inventory. And once I caught him watching Netflix on a display tablet, like it was his living room. I started documenting everything. Tardies, no calls/no shows. Customer complaints, like the time a woman asked if a sweater came in another size and he said, "I don't know, maybe try Amazon." But the breaking point came during Black Friday weekend. Our store was slammed. We had a line to the fitting rooms, a line to the register, and about 3 employees actually working. Kyle? He clocked in, grabbed a cinnamon pretzel, and disappeared into the food court for 2 hours. By the time I found him, sitting at a table scrolling on his phone like he was on a spa day, I was done. We were short-staffed, drowning, and here he was watching football highlights. I fired him on the spot. He laughed. "You're gonna regret that," he said, standing up like a Marvel villain whose powers had just been activated. "My mom knows people." I didn't even dignify it with a response. Just filled out the termination paperwork and moved on. But oh, I should have believed him, because Kyle's mom, she showed up the next morning, stormed in like a hurricane in high heels and a puffy coat. Didn't ask for the store manager, just started yelling in the middle of the women's section. "This is discrimination. My son is a hard worker. You're just threatened because he's smarter than you." A mannequin got knocked over. A baby started crying. One of my employees actually hid behind the register. I tried to keep it professional. Offered to speak with her in the back. She refused, said she was going to expose me. And that's when the Yelp campaign began. 1-star reviews started popping up left and right, all clearly from her or her friends, describing incidents that never happened, claiming I yelled at customers, refused service to military veterans, and once told a kid to go cry somewhere else. One even accused me of spitting in a customer's bag. For the record, I don't even drink water during shifts. Where would I get the moisture? She also called our corporate hotline multiple times, left long dramatic voicemails about how I abused my power, endangered her son's future, and created a hostile shopping environment. Corporate forwarded the calls to me with a note. Please advise. But that wasn't even the worst part. She came back. Again. This time with flyers. Actual printed flyers that said "Fire the Manager," with a blurry picture of me from our store website. She handed them out to customers in the mall, taped them to walls, tried to slip them into people's shopping bags. That was when I called mall security. And here's the thing, our store had documentation. Lots of it. Every complaint, every shift Kyle missed, every time I tried to coach him. I sent everything to mall management. I also shared footage of her disruptive visits, plus a list of fake Yelp reviews tied to her email address. Because, yes, she used the same one she put on a return form a year ago. Not exactly the Zodiac killer. Mall security didn't just ban her from my store. They banned her from the entire shopping center, like full-on trespass order. If she steps foot on the property, she gets escorted out and possibly arrested. They even handed her a printed notice, which she tried to tear up dramatically, only to be reminded there were cameras everywhere. Kyle tried to come back a few weeks later to talk. I reminded him his mum had gotten both of them banned. He mumbled something about suing and walked away with his hood pulled over his face like a failed magician. A month after that, I got a call from another store in the same mall. They'd hired Kyle and he'd lasted exactly 1 week before disappearing mid-shift. Apparently his mom tried calling them too. They just hung up. Wow. Imagine being so bad at your job and so entitled that your mom ends up banned from a whole shopping center. That's not just failing upward, it's failing in all directions at once. Sometimes being the reasonable person in an unreasonable situation makes you look like the villain. But sometimes you just keep the receipts, stay calm, and let policy do the slapping for you. And speaking of people who don't understand consequences, here's what happened when a neighbor kept parking in the wrong spot. For months. There are a few small luxuries that make apartment living bearable. A washer and dryer that actually work. Neighbors who don't host amateur DJ sets at 2 a.m. And most importantly, a guaranteed parking spot. After 10-hour days and brutal commutes, pulling into my reserved space was the closest thing I had to therapy, which is why it drove me absolutely insane when someone else kept parking there. At first I thought it was a fluke. Came home late, found a dusty black sedan in my spot, and figured maybe someone got confused. No big deal. I parked on the street and left a polite sticky note. Hi, this is a reserved spot. Please don't park here again next day. Empty spot. All good. But then it happened again and again. Same car. Same exact time every evening. And every time I left a note. They started getting less polite. By the fourth offense, I figured out whose car it was. Unit 2B, a guy named Travis. Mid-30s, shaved head, Bluetooth earpiece permanently glued to his skull. Walked around like the hallway was his runway and smelled like overcompensating cologne. The type of guy who says, "Let's circle back," in person. So I knocked on his door. He answered like he was doing me a favor. I told him calmly that he was parking in my assigned spot and asked him not to do it again. He blinked at me, then said, "Yeah, the street was full." "You weren't using it," I said. "That's not how assigned parking works." And he laughed. "I'll move it tomorrow." Wow. Nothing like that rich blend of entitlement and laziness. Still, I figured that was the end of it. He knew I knew, and I'd spoken to him face to face. Surely he'd stop. Nope. The next evening, his car was in my spot again. And this time, no note. Just parked there like he owned the building. So I emailed the property manager. Our lease had a very clear section about assigned parking. Every tenant had a designated space, and repeat violations were grounds for towing, with written approval. I explained everything, included dates, photos, even copies of the notes I'd left. She replied within the hour. "Thanks for the documentation. You have my permission to contact the towing company if it happens again?" Oh, Travis, you beautiful, arrogant fool. The next time he parked there, I called the tow company within 5 minutes. They showed up in 10. I watched from my living room window as the truck hooked up his sedan and drove it away into the night like the ghost of bad decisions. Next morning, I left early for work. His spot was empty. Mine was available. Justice. But that wasn't even the worst part for him, because when I came home that night, his car was back. Again. He actually parked there after being towed, like the $300 fee had been a minor inconvenience, like I was bluffing. So I had it towed. Again, 3 times, then 4, 5. Every time he parked there, I sent one email, made one call, and waved goodbye to his precious sedan. I didn't even have to leave my couch anymore. Tow truck drivers started greeting me like an old friend. One of them even said, "This the Cologne guy again?" I nodded. He fist bumped me. By the end of the week, Travis had paid over $1,200 in impound fees. And finally, he cracked. I came home one night and found him standing by my spot, arms crossed, red-faced. "Do you seriously have nothing better to do?" he snapped. I said, "I do. But unfortunately, your inability to follow basic parking rules keeps making this my problem." He opened his mouth to yell. I held up my phone and said, "You want to keep talking, or should I call the tow truck now and save us both some time?" He left, and from that day forward, he never parked in my spot again. Sometimes revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's just consistent, silent, relentless, like gravity or overdue bills. Wow. The guy really thought he could outstubborn a lease agreement. There's a kind of poetic justice in watching someone spend over $1,000 just to learn what the word assigned means. Sometimes being the reasonable person in an unreasonable situation makes you look petty. But honestly, petty gets results when polite doesn't. And if you thought that was satisfying, wait until you hear about the guy who used actual physics to destroy his upstairs neighbor's life. My upstairs neighbor believed in 2 things: bass and beer pong. I'm not kidding. The man was an unholy combination of nightclub DJ and frat house president, and unfortunately he lived directly above me, which wouldn't have been a problem if I didn't work night shifts at the hospital. Now, I'm not one of those noise-sensitive people who expects the world to tiptoe around. I get it. Apartment living means you hear stuff. Creaky floors, the occasional loud movie, maybe a dropped pan here and there. But this guy, he turned partying into a lifestyle brand every single night. It started with music around 10 p.m. and didn't stop until at least 3 a.m. Subwoofer shaking my ceiling, furniture scraping like he was playing musical chairs with his couch, and, my personal favorite, the sound of people yelling, laughing at full volume as if his living room was an open-air bar. And just when I thought it might let up during the week, nope. Tuesday night was Tequila Tuesday. Thursday was Thump Night. He even had a Friday tradition called Shatter Hour. I wish I was kidding. I asked him nicely, twice. The first time I knocked on his door with a polite, tired smile and explained I worked overnight shifts and just needed a bit of quiet during the day. He nodded, apologized, and said he'd keep it down. That night, it got louder. Second time, I knocked again, harder, and told him I'd start contacting the building if it didn't stop. He shrugged and said, "You chose to live below me, bro." Ah, one of those people. So I tried everything. White noise machine? Didn't touch the bass. Earplugs? Only muffled the sound of my sanity leaving my body. Noise complaints to the property manager? Useless. They sent him a warning, and he laughed about it with his friends on his balcony. Then came the breaking point. After working a double shift at the ER, I came home to sleep and, no joke, he started blaring music at 8 a.m., full volume, like it was brunch at Coachella. I hadn't even taken my shoes off yet. And I thought, all right, if he's not going to let me sleep, I won't let him sleep either. But I wasn't just going to stomp on the ceiling or blast music back. That's amateur hour. I went full engineer. I started researching vibration frequencies, specifically the resonant frequency of our building's drywall and floor materials. Think of it like a tuning fork. Every structure has a natural frequency where vibrations feel more intense. Hit that right frequency, and even a small rumble feels like an earthquake. So I built a device, a simple, powerful transducer hooked up to an amplifier, controlled by a timer and audio frequency generator. I mounted it directly to the ceiling of my closet, right beneath his bedroom, and at 5 a.m., Sharp, it turned on. The sound wasn't loud. You couldn't hear it with your ears, but the vibration, oh, it was beautifully awful. The whole upstairs floor buzzed just enough to feel like the ground was shifting beneath your feet. 20 minutes every morning. Buzz, buzz, buzz. By day 3, I heard him pacing. By day 5, his footsteps started slamming across the floor like he was trying to outrun ghosts. On day 7, he went out on his balcony and yelled, "Does anyone else feel that?" He called the property manager, claimed the building was unstable. They inspected everything, found no structural issues. He called the city, same result. At one point, he even stood outside knocking on doors asking, "Have you guys felt the tremors?" Like he was starring in a low-budget disaster movie. But that wasn't even the worst part. For him, the sleep deprivation hit hard. You could hear it in his voice. He started canceling parties, stopped blasting music. Eventually, I heard him whisper yelling on the phone, "I swear the place is haunted or something, man. I keep waking up at 5 a.m., like the floor's trying to throw me out of bed." 2 weeks in, he broke the lease. Packed up in the middle of the night, didn't even say goodbye to his bros. Left a message with management about unlivable conditions, and by the next weekend, he was gone. I turned the device off the same day, slept for 14 hours straight, like a baby on melatonin in a thunderstorm. Sometimes the best revenge doesn't need confrontation. It just needs a little science and an early alarm. Wow. He really said, "You chose to live below me," and ended up haunted by the ghost of structural resonance. Incredible. Sometimes giving someone a taste of their own medicine isn't enough. You've got to invert the whole situation. If they won't let you sleep, you make sure they can't either, but without ever raising your voice. If you thought that was genius, just wait until you meet the chef who fought back with wasabi mousse and ghost pepper ice cream. Working in a restaurant kitchen means you see everything. Customers on dates pretending to know wine, chefs having existential breakdowns during dinner rush, servers sneaking fries when they think no one's watching. But our server, Mason, he didn't sneak, he stole, and not just the occasional fry or a rogue shrimp. This guy had zero shame. He would pick food off customers' plates before they were even delivered to the table. We're talking filet mignon, truffle pasta, lobster tail, fancy stuff, expensive stuff, things that, if you paid for them, you'd probably like to arrive untouched by a stranger's fork. The first time I saw him do it, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he was checking for garnish or inspecting the presentation. Then he popped a scallop into his mouth, shrugged, and said, "They'll never know." My jaw actually dropped. I was like, "Dude, are you serious?" He just smirked and said, "That's the perk of seniority, rookie." For the record, I'd been at that place 2 years longer than he had. I just didn't spend my time scamming people out of their dinner. The problem was, Mason had friends in high places. He schmoozed with the GM, flirted with the bartenders, and always got put on the high-ticket tables. Every time someone complained about their steak being a little smaller than last time, or their burger missing a fry or two, he'd say, "We'll comp dessert," and laugh it off. But those comps came out of our pay. Tip pools, food waste, every bit of that hit the back of house. So after months of watching this guy treat our kitchen like an all-you-can-eat buffet, I decided it was time for some seasoning. I started small. A spoonful of mashed potatoes with extra salt, a fried shrimp doused in horseradish, harmless stuff, just enough to get a reaction. He'd snatch a bite, make a face, and toss the rest in the trash. But the problem with cocky people is they never think they're the target. He assumed it was just bad luck. So I stepped it up. I prepped a plate of calamari, but instead of lemon aioli, I swapped in pure wasabi mousse. Looked the same, smelled the same, but hit like a freight train. Mason popped a ring in his mouth, turned beet red, and sprinted to the bar for water. He came back cursing the supplier, said the squid was off. Nobody corrected him. Then came the masterpiece. It was a slow Saturday and the pastry chef had called out. I offered to handle desserts, which gave me the perfect excuse to prep something special just for Mason. I made 2 identical-looking bowls of vanilla bean ice cream. One was normal, the other, laced with capsaicin extract, the stuff they use to train riot police. I'd used an eyedropper, just 4 drops, enough to burn through enamel, but not enough to hospitalize anyone. I'm not a monster, just motivated. Sure enough, halfway through the night, Mason wandered over and hovered near the counter. Hey, is this for table 9? He asked, pointing at the decoy bowl. I gave him a tired look. Not labeled yet. He grinned, grabbed a spoon, and took a huge bite. And that's when everything slowed down. First came the freeze, like his brain couldn't process what was happening. Then the hiccups. Then the eyes, bloodshot, in seconds. He dropped the spoon, started coughing like he'd swallowed a volcano, and doubled over, gasping. He staggered to the walk-in cooler like a man escaping a fire. 30 seconds later, he was chugging a quart of heavy cream and dunking his entire head in the ice bin. Everyone stared. The GM rushed over asking what happened, and Mason, still crying, tried to say food allergy, but it came out more like He went home early that night, and he never stole off another plate again. Wow. Imagine being so entitled that you treat customers' meals like your own personal tasting menu, and then crying over a spoonful of vanilla. Absolutely legendary. Sometimes karma doesn't come with a warning. Sometimes it shows up cold, creamy, and hotter than the sun. But revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's slow, quiet, and absolutely devastating. When I moved in with Claire, I thought I'd won the roommate lottery. She was polite, paid her share of the rent on time, and baked banana bread just because. The kind of person who left passive-aggressive notes about sink gunk, but signed them with smiley faces. I should have known the smiley faces were a red flag, because it didn't take long to realize Claire was a master manipulator. It started small. She'd wear my clothes and swear I must have forgotten I lent them to her. Food would go missing, like full containers of leftovers, and she'd say, "Oh, I thought that was mine." Okay, not ideal, but not war-worthy. Then she took a package addressed to me and posted the contents on Instagram. It was a custom sweater I had ordered for my mum's birthday. Limited edition, handmade, with our family's initials on the sleeve. And there she was, posing in it with a pumpkin spice latte, captioned "Cozy Girl, Send." I asked her, very calmly, where she got it. She blinked and said, "Oh, I thought that was something you bought for me. You're always saying I should treat myself more." That's when I realized Claire wasn't clueless. She was calculated. She played this perfect little character around other people. Wide-eyed, soft-spoken, always misunderstood. But behind the scenes, she was manipulative, dramatic, and had a PhD in gaslighting. Every time something went missing or got messed up, she'd twist the story until I felt like the crazy one. I'd confront her, and she'd fake cry. Not actual tears, just the trembling lip, distant stare, hand on chest routine like she was auditioning for a CW drama. And worse, people believed her. Friends would say things like, "I think she just looks up to you," or "Claire's going through a lot right now." Right. So much stress she accidentally opened my credit card bill and used the promo coupons inside. But that wasn't even the worst part. One day, I overheard her on the phone with her mom, crying and saying I was mean, controlling, and possibly unstable. She claimed I went through her stuff, that I stole her food, and that she was scared to come home some nights I was in the hallway. She knew I was there. She wanted me to hear it. That's when the switch flipped. I realized there was only one way out of this mess. No fighting, no arguing, no screaming matches in the kitchen over who used the last of the oat milk. If Claire wanted to play the role of the tragic little victim, I'd let her. But I was going to show everyone what was really going on behind the curtain. So I got legal, quiet, strategic. I installed cameras in the common areas, entryway, kitchen, living room, all above board. I even emailed her a notice like, "Hey, for safety reasons I've installed non-private area recording." Just a heads up, she didn't even respond. I also started recording voice memos after every major incident. Time-stamped clear descriptions of what happened. When I caught her moving my mail, memo. When she took my favorite jacket and then said she found it on the coat rack 2 weeks later, memo. And then came the golden tape. One afternoon, I walked in to find her standing in front of the hallway mirror, practicing crying, full-on rehearsal. Tears, sniffles, a shaky voice that started strong and faded into silence. I watched her reset the whole routine 3 times, changing the angle of her chin, wiping under her eyes to reset the tears. I didn't say a word, just backed up and saved the footage. The final piece of the puzzle came when she tried to accuse me of spying on her and called her mom again, this time in front of me. Full performance. Shaking, saying I'd hidden cameras in her room. False. that I was sabotaging her job interviews. What? And that she couldn't live like this anymore. So I said, let's have a mediation. You, me, both our moms. Let's get this all in the open. She agreed immediately, probably thought she could cry her way through it. What she didn't know, I had a slideshow. We sat in the living room on a Sunday afternoon, Claire, me, her mom, my mom, and I clicked play. Video 1, her walking in with my package, opening it and wearing the sweater. Her mom's face, frozen. Video 2, the mirror rehearsal. Her mom turned to her and whispered, Claire, what is this? I showed footage of her eating my leftovers, taking my shampoo, opening my mail, accidentally, breaking my favorite mug, and then laughing about it in the next room. I played the voice memo where she claimed to hate confrontation, but then plotted to make me move out first. By the time I got to the end, Claire wasn't crying. She was silent, red-faced, hands clenched in her lap. Her mum apologized. To me. Said she was ashamed and couldn't believe it. My mum just nodded like, we raised the right one. Claire moved out the following week. No drama, no speech, just gone. Sometimes the only way to win against someone who lives for attention is to take the stage away entirely. Wow. The level of planning, the mirror sob rehearsals, the audacity to fake cry on command. This girl was living in a Lifetime movie of her own making, and then got cancelled mid-season. Sometimes being the reasonable person makes you look cold, until you show the receipts. Then everyone sees who the real villain was. Now, before we wrap up, let me leave you with one final revenge that's so bold. It actually made me laugh out loud. High school reunions don't always happen in gyms. Sometimes they happen when you walk into the boardroom of a failing tech startup wearing a tailored suit, while the same people who used to mock you for fixing cracked iPhones stare at you like they've just glitched. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back in high school, I was the repair guy. You know the type, quiet, decent at math, always had a screwdriver in his backpack just in case someone's phone screen shattered during lunch. I didn't have a cool car or designer shoes. I had a Craigslist soldering kit and a side hustle repairing water-damaged laptops for $20 a pop. My friend group, well, ex-friend group, used to eat that up. They'd call me Geek Squad, make fake receipts like I was some kind of digital janitor, and constantly remind me I'd never be rich fixing other people's trash. I shrugged it off mostly, but yeah, it stung. Especially when they started their own little tech startup during college. They got funding, made a bunch of noise on social media, and even made it onto a local news segment as the future of app development. Meanwhile, I was renting a booth at the back of a cell phone kiosk in a mall that smelled like Wetzel's pretzels and broken dreams. But here's the thing about fixing other people's trash. You learn how everything works. Within 5 years, I had my own full-blown chain of repair shops, 28 locations with technicians trained by me personally. I knew my business inside and out, and while they were posting highlight reels on LinkedIn, I was quietly stacking revenue. So imagine my interest when a tech startup popped up on an acquisition radar through my investment firm. Same town, same people, and listed under the name of their second-round investor, which meant they didn't even realize who was reviewing the deal. Spoiler alert, it was me. Their startup, failing. Poor user numbers, bloated development costs, unpaid server bills, and worst of all, zero brand direction. Their innovative app was basically a glitchy scheduling tool, repackaged 3 times over. But what caught my eye wasn't the product. It was the name on the team roster, Darren, head of product. The Darren who once poured soda on my workbench as a prank because he thought it would be funny to watch me clean sticky circuits. So I made an offer. Not as myself, of course. I used one of the shell companies I keep for strategic acquisitions, offered a price just high enough to tempt their investor to cut losses and run. Within weeks, it was finalized. The ink dried on a Wednesday. I walked into their office on Friday. I'll never forget the moment Darren saw me. He was standing near the coffee machine, arguing with someone about dev timelines, when I stepped out of the elevator. He turned, froze, and gave me this half smirk like he couldn't quite process what was happening. I said, "Good morning. I'm your new CEO. I wish I had a camera to capture the confusion on their faces." One of them, Nick I think, actually laughed, then stopped laughing when I laid out the terms. See, the deal allowed me to restructure the team however I saw fit. And, well, I saw fit to fire all of them. Every single one. I offered severance, of course, I'm not a monster. But make no mistake, it was a full sweep. Cleared the house and replaced them with actual talent from my own company. When Darren asked, "Why are you doing this?" I didn't say much, just shrugged and said, "Guess I'm just really good at fixing broken things." Wow, the guy who said I'd never be rich fixing trash got bought out like last season's inventory. Sometimes being the reasonable one means waiting years for the moment someone finally trips over their own ego and handing them a pink slip when they do. And just like that, justice is served. Not always in the way you expect, but always with flavor. Thanks for joining me on this ride through poetic justice and petty genius. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're exactly my kind of people. Sleep well, stay clever, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is just being better. Sweet dreams, everyone.